Fairfax Academy was polished, towering, prestigious. But for Malik Carter, the silence hit louder than any welcome. Not one student looked him in the eye. He wasn't just new. He was different. The scholarship kid in secondhand shoes, walking into a world that wasn't meant for him. Behind polite smiles and curated posters about diversity, something colder lurked. And when Principal Harlan suggested they were lucky to have him, the chill in Malik's gut said otherwise. What no one knew. He was listening, and he wouldn't stay quiet for long. The first thing Malik noticed about Fairfax Academy wasn't its towering facade or the polished hallways. It was how no one looked him in the eye. The building loomed like a courthouse, all stone and symmetry, as if daring anyone who didn't belong to prove otherwise. Malik adjusted the strap of his backpack, the canvas threadbare near the seams, and stepped through the double doors. A cold gust trailed in behind him, stirring the corners of his coat. Inside, warmth did not follow. "You'll walk into rooms where no one expects you to stay," Alma had said that morning, smoothing the sleeves of the sweater she'd folded the night before. "Let their silence speak. Yours will sing louder." He remembered the weight of her hands on his shoulders and the certainty in her voice, the kind that came from cleaning houses where you never sat down, from knowing how to listen without speaking. Now, standing in the main hallway, Malik walked past glass trophy cases and muted lockers, while a sea of collared sweatshirts and straightbacks shifted without ever turning toward him. Footsteps echoed against tile, announcements buzzed faintly overhead, and somewhere near the end of the corridor, a girl whispered behind her hand, "That must be the scholarship kid." He kept walking. At the reception desk, the secretary didn't lift her eyes from the computer. She waved a hand, gesturing toward the staircase. "Second floor, room 204, she said, then paused as if reconsidering. "That's Mr. Callahan's history class. You're a little early." She didn't smile. Malik nodded, murmured thanks, and turned away. The stairs creaked slightly under his weight, not because they were old, but because everything around him was tuned to silence. On the second floor, bulletin boards displayed student council election posters, all in the same glossy template. Names he didn't know yet. Slogans that rang hollow. Outside room 204, he took a breath. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, rows of desks gleamed under fluorescent light. A few students were already seated, jackets half-zipped, talking softly among themselves. The moment he stepped in, the room hushed, not out of welcome, but from pause, a collective pause that measured him in glances and assumptions. "Seats in the back," said a tall man in a blazer. Principal Harlan, judging by the tone more than the introduction. His words were clipped, his smile perfunctory. "We value diversity, of course. I'm sure you'll adjust." Malik nodded again. He walked to the last row, trying not to bump chairs or step on feet. The murmurs resumed, but quieter this time, folding around him like fog. Someone chuckled behind a notebook. Another nudged a friend with an elbow. His seat was next to the window. He looked out at the bare branches, trembling in the wind. The day moved forward. Names were called. Books opened. Malik listened, wrote, kept his head down. He didn't volunteer answers. He didn't look around. Every now and then he caught the edge of a stare, a smirk, a sideways glance. It wasn't new. It just wasn't familiar in this particular architecture. Lunch came. He didn't go to the cafeteria. Instead, he found the edge of a small courtyard and sat on a low stone wall near a frozen bed of mums. He pulled out the sandwich Alma had made, egg and mustard, wrapped in foil, and unfastened the thermos. The tea inside had cooled. The wind pinched his cheeks, and his fingers reddened as he tapped the metal lid in a slow rhythm, not thinking, just feeling it in his chest. A shadow fell across the grass, then a voice, soft, unsure. "You play?" Malik looked up. Ms. Holland's music teacher stood with her coat open and a stack of folders hugged to her side. She wasn't smiling exactly, but her head was tilted in curiosity, not judgment. He hesitated, then nodded. "A little," he said. "Piano." Unseen behind her, Harlan passed by and stopped just long enough to hear. When Principal Harlan suggested a musical surprise for the parent night, his voice curled like smoke. Sweet, thick, and hard to breathe through. It happened in the middle of the staff lounge, between lukewarm coffee and clattering ceramic mugs. Teachers leaned against counters, glanced at the clock above the microwave, waiting for the bell. Harlan stood near the whiteboard, his sleeves folded just above the wrist. "We're keeping the format familiar, short speeches, student showcase, but this year I thought we'd open with something special," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "A musical surprise, something to show our inclusive spirit." Denise Hollins paused mid-sip. She felt it before he said it. "Malik Carter," Harlan added with a smile that showed too many teeth. "The scholarship student. He plays piano, doesn't he?" A few heads tilted in mild interest. Someone chuckled. Harlan's smile didn't move. "He's got flair, I'm sure. It'll be memorable." The moment unspooled slowly. Miss Hollins placed her mug down too gently. "He's very new," she said carefully. "Hasn't even touched the music room yet." "Then this will be his debut," Harlan replied. "Everyone loves a good underdog story." That afternoon, in classroom 2A, Malik sat rigid in his seat, notebook closed but untouched. The clouds outside pressed against the windows, and a damp chill sank into the room despite the radiator's occasional groan. Harlan walked in unannounced, one hand in his pocket, the other gesturing loosely as if he were conducting a piece no one else could hear. "I've got exciting news," he said to the class. "This Friday's parent night will begin with something unforgettable. Our own Mr. Carter will be opening the evening on piano." Whispers darted like insects. "You've got flair, I'm sure," Harlan repeated directly to Malik. Then he nodded to the class and left, the door swinging softly behind him. There was a beat of silence before a boy with gel-slicked hair began mimicking exaggerated piano motions, humming off-key. "Bet he's got chopsticks on lock." Another snorted. "Gonna need earplugs." Malik's hands curled into fists under the desk, knuckles paling. His legs trembled, but he didn't move, just stared at the grain in the wood. From the side of the room, Miss Hollins watched. She stood, walked over during the lull between subjects, and leaned in just enough for her voice to reach him, but not the others. "Play only if you mean it," she murmured. Then she walked away. Malik didn't answer. He couldn't. Not there. That night, rain laced the basement windows of the Carter home, tracing crooked lines through the condensation. The space smelled faintly of cedar and old sheet music. The piano, chipped and yellowed at the edges, sat in the corner under a single hanging bulb. Malik stood over it, jacket still on, shoes damp. Alma's footsteps moved slowly upstairs, the kettle beginning to hiss. He sat. The bench creaked beneath him. His fingers hovered above the keys. They felt cold, unfamiliar, even though he had known them since he was 7, even though they had known him longer than anyone else had. The first chord was unsteady, the second too soft, but the third rang out full, honest, and slow, the opening of an old church song his grandmother used to hum while hanging laundry. As the melody shaped itself around his hands, Malik's spine lengthened, his breath evened. The muscles in his jaw, so tight all day, began to loosen. He played until the tea kettle whistled, and then, a little longer. He whispered to the cold keys, "I'll play," but not for them. The applause hadn't started yet, but the silence Malik created felt like thunder. The auditorium of Fairfax Academy had never smelled so much like sugar. Cider simmered near the doors, and powdered donuts stacked in neat pyramids on cafe tables gave off the faint warmth of cinnamon. Parents filed in wearing crisp jackets and heels, their voices low and cordial, nodding to each other with a mutual understanding of busy schedules and children worth showing up for. The lights glowed soft and amber, casting long shadows beneath the folding chairs. Malik waited backstage, shirt pressed but slightly wrinkled from the long bus ride. His shoes, one size too big and borrowed from a neighbor, clicked softly against the waxed floor. He kept his gaze low, his hands tucked in his pockets to hide the tremble he hadn't managed to shake. The air backstage was stale and warm, and yet his palms remained cold. "You don't owe them a smile," Alma had said before he left the house, slipping the shirt over his head. "You owe yourself your truth." He hadn't seen her in the crowd yet, but he knew she would come. On the stage, Principal Harlan stepped forward with the microphone. "Thank you all for joining us tonight, for what promises to be an evening of appreciation and talent," he said smoothly, gesturing as if unveiling a grand painting. "To begin, we have a unique offering from one of our newest students. Let's give a warm welcome to Malik Carter. There was a smattering of polite claps, a few murmured names, and somewhere near the front, a chuckle muffled by a program brochure. Malik walked out, each step deliberate, as though the floor might shift beneath him. His shoulders squared despite the weight he carried. He reached the bench, adjusted it with care, and sat. He didn't look at the audience, not even once. He looked at the keys. The spotlight was soft but unwavering. It lit the top of his head and the top row of piano keys, turning them slightly golden. He placed his fingers down and paused. A breath. Another. Then he played. It began with a hymn, the kind sung low and mournful on Sunday mornings in a church with peeling paint and wooden pews. A melody carried through generations, full of longing and resilience. The notes spilled gently at first, like a story hesitating to be told. In the third row, an older woman tilted her head. The room, still in motion moments ago, began to slow. He shifted, seamlessly, into something else, something that didn't belong to the church or any known sheet music, a rhythm his own, minor chords draped over steady progressions, a melody that wound tight, then stretched out, aching and sure. Each note was chosen, deliberate, like footsteps down a long hallway. The audience stopped shifting. Phones paused mid-air. Chairs ceased squeaking. Emily, seated halfway back, angled her camera just so and hit record. Her mouth slightly parted. In the far corner, Mr. Callahan stood against the wall, arms folded, head slightly cocked. His eyes didn't leave Malik's hands. And near the exit, late but present, Alma slid into an empty seat. She set her purse on her lap and folded her hands over it. Her eyes shone in the stage light, though she didn't blink often. Malik's back remained straight, but his fingers flexed as though drawing stories from the wood. The air in the room shifted, from curious to captivated, from casual to reverent. Some leaned forward without realizing. Others simply stopped breathing for a moment. By the time the final note hung, trembling and clear, it felt less like an ending and more like a benediction. For a beat, no one moved. Then in the third row, the old woman stood. She clapped. Others followed, hesitantly at first, then with rising conviction. A wave of applause gathered in the room, cresting and crashing, as if everyone had just remembered how to feel. Miss Hollins wiped the corner of her eye with the side of her finger, not bothering to hide it. Alma closed her eyes and nodded. Malik remained seated, head bowed slightly, the last chord still humming faintly in the strings beneath the lid. Harlan did not clap. He just stared, lips pressed tight. By Monday, Malik's name wasn't just whispered. It was woven into every hallway like an echo that wouldn't fade. The morning wind swept dry leaves across the Fairfax courtyard, and the bulletin boards by the front office were speckled with paper cutouts in the shape of orange and yellow leaves. Each one bore a scribbled note, family, warm meals, my team, all under a banner that read, "What are you grateful for this November?" No one had written Malik Carter, but everyone said his name. In the halls, students nodded when he passed. Some just gave tight-lipped smiles. Others offered murmurs that almost resembled respect. But tucked between those small gestures were sharper ones. A locker slammed too close, a shoulder that didn't quite shift enough to make room, a laugh that paused when he looked over. "You're not invisible just because they don't see you," Alma had once told him, folding laundry late into the night. "They just haven't figured out how to look." Malik walked slowly that morning, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen too much and too little all at once. In the cafeteria, the air smelled like canned gravy and warm rolls. Someone had taped hand-drawn pumpkins to the vending machines. He sat alone as usual, but it felt different now, not isolating, but observed. On his tray, a folded napkin and a cold carton of chocolate milk. Next to it, an envelope. He looked around. No one seemed to be watching. He opened it, in neat, slanted handwriting on lined paper. That took guts. No signature. Later, in the music room, the lights buzzed softly overhead. Ms. Hollins sat at her desk, a stack of dusty file folders spread out before her. She didn't look up when Malik entered, just motioned gently toward the upright piano in the corner. He started practicing scales, but kept glancing over. She flipped through pages, student names, red ink suspension notices, administrative memos. Her finger paused over one. 2016, she said softly. Luis Cardenas. Barred from the state jazz competition last minute. No explanation in writing. Just eligibility concerns. She turned the folder toward him, but he didn't read it. Instead, he asked, "Is that why you teach here still?" She looked at him for the first time. "It used to be for the music," she said. "Now, I think it's for the silence. Someone's got to hear it." By the lockers, Emily moved quietly. Her phone lit up every few seconds. Notifications from a video that had gone viral over the weekend. She didn't say anything to Malik directly, but she slipped flyers into the corner of bulletin boards behind announcements for the Thanksgiving canned food drive. Each flyer had a black and white graphic, the echo room, a space for stories they didn't want to hear. Below it, a QR code. In the staff lounge, Ms. Hollins raised the topic of equity during the Monday meeting. "We might consider revisiting access to performance opportunities," she said. "Transparency matters." Harlan smiled, polished and pleasant. "We wouldn't want to overcorrect based on a single performance," he said. "Let's focus on gratitude this week." No one challenged him. That afternoon, Alma answered the landline with flowers still on her fingers. "I saw your boy on the internet," the voice on the other end said, gentle and surprised. "He played like the room belonged to him." Alma didn't speak for a second. Then she whispered, "It did. For once, it did." In the last period, Malik walked past a group of students gathered around one of Emily's flyers. They didn't say anything, but none of them tore it down. That evening, as the halls emptied and twilight brushed the windows in blue, Ms. Hollins found another folder, thicker this time. She sat down at the piano bench, opened it, and read through a litany of names and dismissals. Then, a voice behind her. "Denise," Harlan said, leaning against the doorframe. "Let's not let emotions cloud what's best for the school. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just quietly removes your chair and pretends there was never one there." On Monday morning, the rain came down steady and slantwise, misting the air with a chill that clung to every collar. The foyer of Fairfax Academy shimmered with new strands of holiday lights, blinking cheerfully against the gray windows. Plastic poinsettias lined the front office desk, and someone had taped a felt snowman to the hallway bulletin board. It was supposed to feel festive. Malik didn't feel festive. He walked toward the music room like he always did, keeping close to the lockers, hood damp from the walk. When he reached the door, the sign stopped him cold. Room closed for maintenance. Do not enter. The lettering was neat, official, laminated. He tried the handle anyway, locked. The hallway behind him creaked faintly. A few students passed without comment. One of them looked at the sign and raised an eyebrow, but didn't stop. Malik stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked away. "They'll smile while pulling the rug," Alma had once warned him, "but it's what you do when you're already falling that counts." By lunchtime, the shift in air was undeniable. Miss Hollins found a note in her mailbox, unsigned, typed in formal language. It advised staff to remain within approved curricular boundaries during student interactions. She read it twice, then folded it and tucked it into her planner without comment. In the library, Emily sat with 3 other students, quietly reviewing design proofs. The Echo Room stories were now live on a simple blog. Black text, no names. Just titles like "The Time They Told Me to Smile," and "I Wasn't Invited because my English wasn't strong enough." Emily kept her face calm, but her fingers moved quickly over the trackpad. By the end of the day, she'd printed a stack of flyers and submitted a formal petition to the student board. Talent belongs to everyone. That afternoon, in a staff meeting, Principal Harlan spoke with his usual velvet composure. "We've had a remarkable few weeks," he said, hands folded. "But we must not let a single event overshadow academic discipline and focus. Let's remember what we're here for." Across the table, Mr. Callahan cleared his throat. "And inclusion isn't part of that focus?" His voice wasn't loud, but it echoed in the quiet that followed. Harlan smiled, slow and measured. "Of course it is, John. But we must be careful not to confuse momentum with direction." The meeting continued. No one else interrupted. Malik kept his head low that week. In class, he answered only when called on. At lunch, he returned to his old spot by the courtyard wall, now wet with rain. He stopped bringing his thermos. The piano room stayed locked. One morning, he noticed the posters Emily had hung last week were gone. Not torn, removed cleanly. He said nothing, but he noticed. In the teacher's lounge, Hollins pulled another folder from the dusty filing cabinet she'd begun revisiting nightly. Many records were still there, incomplete, vague, but one she'd flagged last week was now missing. She flipped through each drawer again, slower this time. Nothing. On Wednesday, a thick envelope arrived at the administrative office. It bore the seal of the County Board of Education. An audit had been scheduled. Citing, quote, community concerns, the letter stated that Fairfax Academy would undergo a formal review beginning the following Monday. Down the hall, in his office, Harlan read the letter twice. He didn't speak. He didn't call a meeting. Instead, he walked to the metal cabinet behind his desk, unlocked the bottom drawer, and began feeding papers into the shredder one by one. Outside his window, the lights on the holiday tree flickered red, green, and gold, soft and blinking like nothing at all was happening. When they shut the doors, the students moved outside, and the cold couldn't quiet them. By twilight, the lawn of Fairfax Academy shimmered with strings of soft, battery-powered lights crisscrossing above rows of folding chairs. The frost hadn't yet claimed the ground entirely, but the blades of grass sparkled faintly with ice. The air bit at fingertips and flushed cheeks, but no one left. Volunteers, students in layered hoodies and mismatched gloves, adjusted mic stands and uncoiled orange extension cords with practiced urgency. The official winter showcase had been canceled. No announcement, no reason, just a note from the front office, postponed due to scheduling conflicts. But that hadn't stopped anyone. Emily moved between clusters of students, directing where to place heaters and how to angle the last row of chairs. Mr. Callahan stood by a folding table, clipboard in hand, helping wire a donated soundboard. Miss Hollins didn't give instructions. She didn't need to. She simply watched with eyes that glowed like lanterns from behind her scarf. Near the back row, Alma wrapped her shawl tighter, her breath visible in short clouds. She sat in the same seat she'd chosen at parent night. Far enough to see everything, close enough to be the first to clap. Malik stood at the edge of it all. He wore the same shirt from that night, pressed again, sleeves rolled just once. His shoes were polished with a kitchen rag. His eyes scanned the scene like he wasn't quite sure it was real. Then he moved through the gathering crowd with quiet purpose, nodding at those who stepped aside for him. He sat at the piano, centered on the grass. No platform, no spotlight, just frost underfoot and silence all around. "You don't need their permission to be heard," Alma had said that morning, brushing lint from his collar. "You just need your voice." He didn't look at the windows of the school, but if he had, he would have seen Harlan, high on the second floor, behind glass, arms folded, back straight, alone. Malik breathed. Then he played. It began with a hymn again, familiar, low, the kind people don't recognize until it moves something deep in their chest. From there, it shifted into something more intricate, lacework of classical runs and gospel chords that soared and twisted like breath in winter air. Notes built upon notes, phrases folding into one another, forming something neither tradition nor rebellion, but something fully and only his. The cold vanished for a moment. The lights above stopped flickering. Even the wind seemed to pause. In the crowd, some held their phones low, recording. Others didn't move at all, afraid to break the spell. Behind the trees, headlights from two black county sedans flickered and dimmed. Officials stepped onto the grass quietly, unnoticed by most, and when Malik struck the final chord, sustained, deep, and closing like a door, no one clapped at first, not out of hesitation, but reverence. Then the applause came. It came like rain, like a breaking wave. Some stood, some wept, some simply looked at each other in stunned silence. Miss Hollins waited until the very last echo had faded. Then she stepped forward, slipped a thick envelope into the hands of the county liaison, and returned to the circle without fanfare. Later that night, in their small kitchen lit only by the stove light, Malik opened the email. He stared at the screen, blinking once. A full scholarship, regional conservatory. Across the table, Alma didn't ask what it said. She just reached across and placed her hand over his, steady and warm. In Harlan's office, the same email arrived. It wasn't addressed to him. But the one beneath it was, subject, official inquiry, immediate action required. The next Monday morning, the school halls were quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. As students passed the music room, they stopped briefly. A new flyer was taped on the door. Coming soon, Carter Music Lab. Under the quiet twilight, Malik's fingers had said everything words could not. What began as a cruel joke ended as a hymn of defiance, a melody that reshaped a school, a boy, and the silence between them. Power was never in the applause, but in the dignity to play anyway, even when the stage was pulled away. Justice doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it slips in softly, on the heels of a child who refuses to bow. If this story stayed with you, consider sharing it. Someone else may still be waiting to be seen.